All right. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to another tweet breakdown of the Bitcoin Stoa. Tweet breakdown is a short format show where we break down Bitcoin one awesome tweet at a time. Current Moscow time is 2376 at 7:18:089. And as a reminder, the Bitcoin Stoa is a community funded platform. So if you enjoy listening to the show, you can support the project by sending some sats to the QR code on our homepage at bitcoinstoa.com. Or you can use something like the Breeze app to stream sats as you listen. Breeze has a really badass podcast feature. With that said, I am honored to welcome Cedric Youngelman to the show so we can break down the tweet that he put out on December 29th. Cedric is the creator behind the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. And if you haven't checked it out already, you definitely should. He's had some awesome guests and he's a badass interviewer. Cedric, welcome to the Stoa. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much. I'm super excited to chat. I'm thrilled that you picked this tweet and I'd love to get into it.
Beautiful. Let's do it. So on December 29th, just to kind of frame this, December 29, 2021, you tweeted when people who don't understand Bitcoin try to describe it, and underneath that, there was a picture. The picture was an elephant with 6 blindfolded people touching different parts of the elephant and essentially saying that what they're touching is completely different things. And, one guy says it's the spear, he's touching the tusk. One guy says it's the rope because he's touching the tail. And, to me, when I saw that, number one, all those people are both correct and wrong at the same time. And when I saw this tweet, it was really powerful timing because I had just been in a bunch of Twitter spaces where basically people were ripping each other's heads off, arguing, trying to say that Bitcoin is this or Bitcoin is not this. And, the reality that Bitcoin is many things, depending on what perspective you come at it from. And there's many faces to this sort of thing that we call Bitcoin. And so maybe to start, I'd love to hear your perspective on this tweet. What made you want to post it? And maybe even, what perspective did you come at Bitcoin when it initially crossed your path? So what made you want to post this beauty? And what perspective did you first see Bitcoin from when you first discovered it?
Sure. What made me want to post this? I was really frustrated with some people in Normie Land, and primarily some of my wife's friends. And one of them just kind of really talks a lot of nonsense about Bitcoin. She's just always hated it. She doesn't understand it at all. She's proud of that, but she likes to sort of label, categorize it, and poo-poo it or shit on it. And at this particular point, throughout the last 3 or 4 months, things like I run into her at a party and talking to her maybe husband about Bitcoin. And then she'll tweet the next day, like, all Bitcoiners are narcissist douchebags. And then, later on, someone tweeted, this was actually the real inspiration. Someone she follows tweeted that, she doesn't understand Bitcoin and crypto, and I'll just let that go with shitcoins, but, and why we should use all this power. We're already running out of power, which is destroying the earth, and I just don't get it. And her response was, Bitcoin is just multi-level marketing for bros. So I'm like, all right. So, and this is over the course of Bitcoin in the last just 18 months alone, going from 3,500 to now what's called 40,000. And she's just advocating for people to either not like it or to have negative connotations of it. She's angry when it's brought up. And I just wanted to think of a way to represent that. And this tweet sort of, I think, really encapsulated that really well. She's trying to describe something that she just doesn't understand or can't see the whole thing. And I don't think there are many things in the world that are like that per se. Maybe it's like the internet, or you could talk about maybe inventions that really change things and we never saw the ripple effects of them. But, unless you're, truly blind and you have a really large object, generally speaking, we understand what certain things are, like the hammer, or a car, especially after this point. So,
yeah. Why do you think some people get such pleasure out of talking shit about something they clearly know very little about? I was trying to understand people, right? There's one part of me is just like, these fucking people know nothing about what they're talking about, and they seem supremely confident that they are right. But the other side of me is like, why does this person, because I know some people like that every chance they get, they will find one stat, like a price drop or something like that. And they'll put it out there and say like, see, I can't buy Bitcoin. It dropped 20% in like a week. And it's like, what they won't say is like, how much is it up on the year and how does that compare to the other things that you have your money in, right? They'll purposely choose the one thing that can give them like a little jab. Why do you think she gets so upset about it? Is it like,
I think it's a matter of choice and responsibility, likes being a victim, that's sort of that martyrdom. And if Bitcoin is real, then you actually have to take a chance. You have to, I think Bitcoiners learn that it's actually believing in yourself. Because for me, you asked me, I think, what from the second question was that I didn't answer. From what perspective did I see Bitcoin?
Right.
Initially, yeah. And I initially saw it as just speculation. It was not something I understood the first and second time that I came across it. I very much saw it as the first time as probably just a new payment technology. It sounded really cool, maybe some libertarian connotations, but really just, wow, there's new technology here. And the second time, I think it was sort of a continuation of that arc. And it wasn't until the third or fourth and really the fifth time that was just happening so much on Twitter at that point, where I was just getting a lot of signal in my feed. But at that point, people are saying things I don't understand about Bitcoin or in terms of describing it in all these different ways. And I'm just seeing price run. And I'm thinking about, well, if this thing is anything like these people are saying, like, why don't I get a little bit skin in the game? And from there, depending on, it was more of just really have to challenge this thing. Am I a genius? Because I bought it in November of 2017 and it did a 4X from there, and then am I an idiot, now that it's crashed 90% from there? And what do I do from here? So learning about, I got less and less blind from that point. But I think that took a lot of, and I don't like the word humility, because I don't think it was being humble or anything of that sort, but it took open-mindedness. And it sort of took critical thinking and being willing to be wrong and try something new and maybe lose some money, I think, on something that you don't understand. And then for me, it was the more I didn't understand it, if I wanted to get more money into it, I had to understand it more. I mean, it just wouldn't make sense to put good money after bad.
Right.
So there's so much there that we could get into, but, I think about sort of the Paul Krugmans of the world who, describe the internet as, sort of equating it with the fax machine.
Yeah. It's going to be no more use than a fax machine.
Yeah.
That's a bad take.
Yeah. And I really remember when Amazon came out and, such an easy analogy was like, oh, it's gonna be like the online Barnes and Noble, right, or Borders. And it's just, that's an insult at this point to call it something like that. But that was just 100x the size. People couldn't fathom that this online thing could do as much sales as something that had 3,000 locations in North America and a supply chain of warehouses and book deals. And but then they just did that vertical after vertical after vertical. And then so much more. I mean, no one saw cloud computing back then as being, 50 or 60% of their business. So, we were all blind back then because it was a huge Goliath, as was, Google or Microsoft or any of these sort of internet technologies today and the way we use them.
Yeah. And Bitcoin's almost like this organism that was born in 2009 and is growing up, and it's growing up to find its path, right? To find like where does it fit? What use cases does it have? And the thing with technology is like when technology comes out, we can't even imagine what uses it's going to have until those essentially come up by necessity and people use it for things we never expected, right? And we're going to do a show at the Stoa called Bitcoin Is, and I think we already have like 37 episodes lined up with different things, right? Bitcoin is human rights technology. Bitcoin is sound money. Bitcoin is all these things. And it can be multiple things without conflicting with something else that it can be for someone else. And I think that was really what got me with your with that graphic is like, well, they're all correct based on how they're interacting with this elephant. Mm-hmm. But they're all also wrong because they're not actually seeing the full elephant, right? And I think it takes a lot of responsibility, to want to really uncover all the different facets that Bitcoin can be, right? So you really have to be pretty motivated or into it, or have achieved some level of financial freedom to be able to have the time to do that. But one thing that I sense in people who are really bitter and just love shit talking Bitcoin is a bit of bitterness.
Mhm.
That some of those people, I told them about Bitcoin like 3 or 4 years ago, and they shrugged it off, and they thought they were high on their horse, saying, "Oh, it's stupid. It's good. You're going to lose all your money." And then now, when I try and approach it gently, right? I don't want to go and say I told you so, or whatever.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I really think, every time I mention it and they choose to shit talk it instead of just starting to look into it a bit more, they're making a decision to avoid taking responsibility, and hoping that something bad happens to it. And
Yeah.
I think it's like, what a shitty perspective, like, why don't you
Yeah.
just look into it on the off chance that it does what it can do?
Yeah, the only time they do look into it is with hate and disgust. And they want to root against it. I do
Yeah.
think it's a sort of a result of mass formation psychosis. I think it's a fiat thing, and it's you'll see it in different ways from even rich or poor people. But maybe they have high anxiety. Maybe they have concerns and uncertainties, but they don't want to own those things or sort of the outcomes.
Right.
They want to be able to make different choices than other people, but they want to have the same or better outcomes. And I think that if you sort of, I think Bitcoin is like piercing the bubble at that point. So that means that there must be other things that they've been taught that have been wrong. And they don't want to think that what they've been taught is wrong, because they're smart people. They
Right.
would have figured that out before you. You're not gonna figure out the new money, or what's going to change the world before they would. Or
Right.
if it's true, like, how would you know about it first? Everybody would be telling them about it, especially their preferred news outlets or sources of
Or their financial
information,
advisor. That's the
or
one I
their
get often.
financial advisor, right? And because they can't even see a lot of things there, that it's not a stock, it's not a bond, it's not gold, it's not these things. They can't see that. If it was any of those things that had actual value, again, their financial advisor would bring it to them, but they can't even see the conflict of interest there
Right.
for most financial advisors. I've been really going through this with my parents now, because and they're getting into their 80s, and they're looking at sort of they were public school teachers, and they have small pensions, and trying to figure out how to like maintain whatever small wealth they've built. And um they're learning a lot about financial advisors now. They had a terrible experience, and a lot of that is because the person who comes out and attracts them and to manage your wealth is a salesperson, and they have nothing to do with the actual management of money. They tend to even not make that much money relative to and anyone who's made money from money and manages money, generally speaking, doesn't manage small amounts of money, or market for money, or have the time to
Right.
doing those things. And they might not be the kind of people you want to be around very often in a social setting. So they're learning that the person that quote unquote manages money doesn't even know what the team is doing with your money.
Right. They may as well be selling vacuum cleaners, because they're
Right.
basically making a sale, making a commission, moving on to the next one, having
Right.
zero binding element as to whether or not the money they make has anything to do with whether you make or lose money. And I think that's like you're forfeiting any kind of alignment of interest, because they're interested in selling you something regardless of what that thing is. And the sad part is, like, there is no financial advisor for Bitcoin. You have to be your own
Mhm.
financial advisor and take full responsibility to really understand this thing. And it is complex. And I completely agree. My parents are a little bit younger than yours, but I'm watching them. I live in Canada. So from Jan 20 to 21, M2 went up 18.5%. I watched my parents' wealth melt by 18.5%, and they didn't know anything was happening. And it's much more impactful on them, who are no longer earning more money and have to live off the money they have, than it is for me. But it was just so frustrating. And one of the people who gives the most resistance is my old man, who's invested in real estate. Says, I can't touch it. Like, houses are up whatever percent. And I'm like, dude, you're using the wrong compass. Like, it's up that much
Yeah.
percent in fiat terms, but it's down a shitload in Bitcoin terms. And it's hard to convey that sometimes.
Yeah, it affects everyone in strange ways. I really think, looking back on things, I probably would have got married earlier in life. I mean, you know, I never would have married a different person, but like, I think we would have tried to figure out how to, just we weren't incentivized to get as married as young, because we couldn't. Things were out of reach,
Mm.
and things were always getting out of reach. Is what it more was. What it felt like. You were like, oh, if I save X in 10 years to get Y, but by the time I get to 10 years, it's actually going to cost me 2y.
Right.
So it's just everything. And that leads to a certain form of like nihilism or just very heightened time preference. Like, well, I got $80 in my pocket. I'm not going to buy, $170 in Apple stock right now. You need to go there with 3,000. And, the house is that, so now you're like, okay, might as well go out, get a nice meal,
Right.
have some drinks with friends and just enjoy it. Like what's the $80 going to do? And it's not going to add up in this system. Especially when you look at your pay raise and the cost of living compared to inflation. It's always a red queen's race.
Yeah.
So I think it really even just affects the young in incredibly powerful ways.
I agree. And so when you first, has your perspective of what Bitcoin is, like where you were touching the elephant when you first saw Bitcoin and how you view the elephant now, how has that changed? Has it been significant? And yeah, talk to us a little bit about that. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So, I went just deep down the rabbit hole. I just felt that there was something really interesting and powerful here. It wasn't, I'd never really speculated on an asset before. I've just been really a buy and hold really through the old method of your 401k and, or, maybe allocations here and there, but never really trying to time markets or anything like that. But it just seemed like I could not only speculate, but that this thing might be really, really big from whatever I was sniffing on Twitter. So I just went down the rabbit hole hard, lots of podcasts, articles, 24/7 to the point where I think, it's obsessive and probably, I have to figure out ways to not let it interfere too much with my family life and because they're the most important thing. And I think a lot as I was getting through that, especially the bear market, and I saw the opportunity of like, well, if this is what I think it is, and I'm just going to keep beating it up and from every single angle, I'm going to challenge this from every single angle to make sure that like, if this is how you're going to store your life's wealth, this has to make sense. Can I secure it properly with my abilities? Can it be hacked? What are the chances of a software bug in this fast system? Is it truly decentralized? You learn about pre-mines and shitcoins. I think, I lost like probably something like, 10 grand on shitcoins. So, that was a really powerful, I found like that to be like a second MBA, like getting another degree. And I learned not just
It's
about
a cheap MBA
shitcoins,
too.
but yeah. And it further reinforced a lot of what I already knew about legacy markets. I've spent my whole life in finance and accounting, but I learned so much more about just money and even just decentralization and what that means and why it doesn't apply or why blockchain doesn't apply to these other things. And it's like why like taking a carburetor out of a car is not going to do anything with a horse, and but you really need the carburetor and you really need the transmission. You need all these things together. So yeah, a huge evolution. And then it just permeated outside of Bitcoin. It really reinvigorated a lot of the thoughts I had 10 and 20 years earlier about just lots of different things. So I've always been sort of into that notion of what you're teaching me might not be good for me, or it might be from your perspective, or so this kind of reinvigorated a lot of that. And not even so much from like a conspiracy theory, just like where can I find more truths? And what have I like been onto before and I was wrong about? What have I been onto before and I put down and I was right about? Whether it's a lot of things about low time preference or high time preference or diet, exercise, whatever it might be there. But really learning a lot about money and monetary policy and Austrian economics. As someone with a finance, economics, and accounting background, I was not familiar with Austrian economics and praxeology. So these are huge new areas for me that I continue to pour into, that I think are, tangential to Bitcoin, but they're not one and the same. And even things about politics and democracy and monarchy and skin in the game and game theory. So yeah, there's just so much to learn. And I think learning is fun. So it's kind of, that's been really cool about it is, I don't like the word community because I don't really want to be even necessarily part of a group, but I like the community in terms of Bitcoin Twitter, where learning, you can geek out on certain things and noodle on things. And I like the idea of, I learned this a lot on Twitter and Bitcoin Twitter, but just anonymity and just ideas and the battle of ideas. And I like where, iron sharpens iron, and, we can kind of debate something, and it's getting at the truth. I think
Yes.
that's really interesting to me, is conversations about the truth. And you can have your truth, and maybe even your truth changes over time. I like, I say to a lot of relatives who just, they want me maybe to stop telling them about Bitcoin, or maybe I'm wrong or something. And I'm like, well, then can you do me a favor and you put in a little bit of work, like just a modicum of work, and come back and tell me how crazy that I am in a rational way that can refute what I think, and save me the hell of going further on this path.
A lot to ask people,
You know?
Cedric.
I think it's a
lot.
little bit. It's like, if you could find something wrong, because that's what
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person where if you tell me something and you're like, it's an absolute, that's just the way it is. Well, I'll be like, all right, come on. And I'll spend a little time maybe on that if I think the person is worth it, or the issue is worth it, or that maybe they're right. And I should, because that's what Bitcoin Twitter was at first. I didn't understand what these people were yelling and screaming at me for, with all this sort of toxic, Bitcoiner pleb stuff. I was like, well, all right, I get it. It's fun. It might go up or something. And it's like, no, it's more than that. I was like, well, okay, what do you mean it's more than that? Like, why should I think it's more than that?
Right.
Or why do you think it's going to change the world? Why does fixing the money fix the world?
It really makes you go into systems thinking. Like, there's no way to wrap your hand around Bitcoin without taking a really systems perspective, and then wanting to systematically understand each of the systems a little bit more. And yeah, it is really this powerful thing where, that notion, Bitcoin, you won't change Bitcoin, but Bitcoin will change you. And if you like learning and you enjoy, I think skepticism is good in general, but I
It's really
also
good.
think unbiased, informed skepticism is the good kind of skepticism, right? Like, some people are skeptics, they're completely uninformed, completely biased, and they don't recognize it. It's like, well, that's just silly. It, what do you view Bitcoin as now? Like, say you were one of those 6 people with the elephant. What single thing resonates most with you, in terms of, if someone said, what is Bitcoin, what would be the main term that would resonate with you personally most right now, not exclusively of everything else, but maybe primarily?
Wow. I mean, I want to read this a little bit. I looked it up because so the parable of the blind men and an elephant originated in ancient Indian subcontinent, from where it has been widely diffused. It is a story of a group of blind men who have never come across an elephant before, who learn and imagine what the elephant is like by touching it. Each blind man feels a different part of the elephant's body, but only one part, such as the side or the tusk. They then describe the elephant based on their limited experience, and their descriptions of the elephant are different from each other. In some versions, they come to suspect that the other person is dishonest, and they come to blows. The moral of the parable is that humans have a tendency to claim absolute truth based on their limited subjective experience, as they ignore other people's limited subjective experiences, which may be equally true. So there's a
Dude,
lot
that
of
was so good. Thank you for looking that up.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of ways the story can end. Sometimes it ends in violence, because there's a lot of arrogance, maybe, but sometimes it ends in compromise. And I think that Bitcoin is an incredibly hard thing to sort of chisel away, or explain to someone from the start, because I do think it's just, for me, it's money. But then, what does money mean? Most people don't understand what money is and how it impacts the world beyond just a medium of exchange. And in sort of in terms of our time, and we get into maybe things about inflation or taxation. So there's just so much there. And I've also come to realize, and I think I got Parker Lewis really distilled this well at BitBlock Boom, is, if you come in trying to just land Mike Tyson body blows and explain to them there's a new financial system and it's going to change everything from how we communicate, because money's a language, to we're going to get our time back from the government because the government is evil. It's just, a lot of people are going to freeze up, and you
lose them.
You lose them. So I really think you have to kind of cater to the individual. It's really about their interest, their openness. I think for a lot of people, money is a very difficult subject. One of the things that's hard to explain to people is the less money they have, this might be even more important to them. So, but it's really hard to explain to someone that $1 a day or $10 a week or $100 a week, whatever works for somebody, is actually going to add up in Bitcoin time, and what that could amount to in 4 to 8 years. And a
Mhm.
lot of people just can't see that. And they can't get by like, well, I'm just going to grab a Starbucks for $4. Like, why am I going
Right.
to pass up on that? And you're just losing people from all different angles, depending on whether they're open at all. So if you get a half hour, an hour with someone, which is probably what their cup can handle in a first passing,
Yep.
it's
That's a
wherever their
generous cup
interests
too.
are.
That's a generous
Yeah,
cup. But yeah, I agree.
it's really generous cup. And I think I've learned from too many, like trying to knock them out and getting my, technically when they walk away, you're getting your ass kicked. So,
Yep.
and just trying to get through to people. And in a lot of ways, it's really about price over time. It's very interesting because maybe you have a lot of credibility with someone and yet they still can't hear what you're saying.
Yep.
Um,
I think orange pilling is an art, and what I've learned is, I'm working to be as effective of an orange pillar as I can, because I think that's the best way I can contribute. Is just treat every opportunity, every person that expresses curiosity, treat that as like an immensely powerful opportunity to ask them questions to understand what they currently know, so that I can identify misconceptions. But more importantly, it's like, why are they even curious, right? Where are they coming from? What are they seeing this as? And where are they with their understanding, right? Because if if they're just ready to take a little sip, and you give them the fire hose, like trying to knock them out with Mike Tyson punches, it's like, that's not going to go over well. They're going to feel like they're drowning and they're going to tap out because they're like, this is overwhelming. Fuck that.
Right.
But if you give them a sip and you give them the right sip that they're ready to take right now, which will lead to them, having a deeper thirst for it. I think if we're all a bit more diplomatic in how we approach people or companies that express curiosity, I think, I'm not saying everyone has their own approach. Someone that has a right in your face approach of just pure maximalism, I'm not going to tell them that's right or wrong. But what I've learned from my experience is like, that's not the most effective way to get someone on Team Bitcoin. And I think we need as many people on Team Bitcoin as possible.
Yeah.
So
I think part of my approach there is really just getting people, I want to spark their interest and their curiosity. And I hope actually that people learn more about Bitcoin, maybe than just take blind faith because of what I say. So I kind of say, like, you don't have to put anything into it. Like, why don't you just take a look at it? Maybe I could steer you with the right podcast, article, book, whatever works for you, or whatever interest or writing style you like. But, and also just kind of thinking about like, but if it's someone I love and like, I'm like, I would be responsible for you if anything happened. I'll be like, listen, you should just put a little bit into this thing. Pick a number.
Yeah, just get off zero.
Just get something. Or let me give you a little bit. Let me give you $10 or $100 in sats so that you could see what this thing is like.
Yep.
And just maybe then that'll encourage them to check it more on their phone and price. And over time, they see that it goes up, and then you gain more credibility. I mean, the price is like a scoreboard.
Yep.
And the more you talk about it, the more people, because they don't see it as real money. You'll hear questions like, oh, how much do you have? Or I think what happens to a lot of people is when you bring up Bitcoin, they think a lot about they think about it adversarially, the way you would maybe bring up, like, I can get a liquor license from the mayor and maybe you can't. So,
right.
Like, okay, I have a leg up on buying this storefront or renting the storefront. Now I'm going to make more money than you in life and this, that, and the other, because I have a leg up. And they're like, well, maybe I know someone who can bump you out of that. And a year from now, I'll get it. And I won't tell you that. So it's adversarial. So in Bitcoin, I see what a lot of people are like looking at you and they're like, how long has he been talking about this? How much do I think they have? So then they're thinking, okay, well, they'll make up a number in their head, what they think you have. And they're like, okay, well, can I get to that number? Would I be willing to liquidate whatever to get there? And if the answer is completely no, then they're like, I want this thing to lose.
Right.
I don't want you to do well. I'm not going to really listen to what you're saying. And I'm going to look somewhere else or just ignore it till it dies. And it's not so much about, because they see it as like, well, if they're right. I think a lot of people, Bitcoin Tina talks a lot about this, just in terms of when people strike massive wealth, in terms of like a Jeff Bezos or anyone like that, like your friends and family. They're never, generally speaking, they're not like just truly happy for you.
Right.
They can't understand why it didn't happen to them. And in terms of Bitcoin, like they think like, oh, you're promoting this because you got in early, you've made X, Y, and Z dollars. So you're ahead of me. I have to find my own way to catch up on you, because this thing's only another fiat game that you'd always be ahead of me in.
Right. Yeah, that fiat mindset, it
Killer.
ingrains deeply, right? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of Bitcoiners get it because, at one point we were all formerly there, and we understand how deep the programming is with not just how we think of money, but how we think of money essentially colors how we think of the world. And we lump it into we chunk it into all these assumptions that hold true, that have held true until now. And for some people, this is just too disruptive for them to take down all their old mental models and rebuild them all from scratch. And, to the people who take responsibility, you get rewarded deeply. To the people who don't, boy, you're left on the sidelines, and you're probably going to be more and more pissed as you see the number go more and more up. So eventually it's like, it's not really an option. So you may as well do it when it's out of curiosity instead of when it's out of pain.
Yeah.
Either way, we'll be here to help you though. So
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, they say everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve.
you got it.
You're just really trying to bring your friends and family along at the best price possible. It's a shame that, we all say we hate talking about price. Price is the least interesting thing, but it is the most important thing in terms of probably adoption in a lot of different ways. It's sort of the, that's probably the way I came, whatever I grabbed onto the tail, the rope, probably the tail was price for me.
Yep. I love how Alex Svetsky, I did an interview with him not long ago, and he has a great line. He said, I got into it for the money and I stuck around for the money. The money initially is just, I want to get rich. The money eventually is like sound money fixes humanity.
Right.
So once again, same thing, different meanings. Anyway, I want to honor your time. We keep these short format, but thank you so much for being here and recording this, Cedric. I'm a big fan of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, and maybe down the road, I'd love to interview the interviewer and maybe do a longer format show and really hear your story and riff on a bunch of things. But to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for another tweet breakdown of the Bitcoin Stoa. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We look forward to creating more of these short form shows in 2022. If you enjoyed the show, you can support the Stoa by sending some sats to QR code at bitcoinstoa.com. Cedric, anything that you want to leave people with in terms of where to find you if they haven't heard of the Bitcoin Matrix or Twitter or anything like that?
Please check out the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, a philosophical podcast about Bitcoin and the future of money and the implications on society, culture, and politics. We can be found I'm at Ced Youngelman on Twitter, CEDYOUNGELMAN, and at Dayla BTC Matrix for the show handle. And you can listen to the show anywhere you listen to your podcast, or it's on YouTube as well. So stack
Powerful,
stats,
my man.
Stay humble and stay laser focused.
And stack sats, baby. Thanks for being here, Cedric. Much love. Bitcoiners are so generous with their time. I sent you a message on Instagram or on Twitter, and then here we are, and you gave up time on your Monday night. I know you have a family. I know you're a busy dude. So much love to you. Thanks for listening, everyone, and ciao for now.